Hey YouTube, Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And this is not just any knife video. This is my first zero tolerance. Let's turn it so you can see it. This is my first zero tolerance video. This is the ZT-0560. It is the black wash finish that's new for 2014. As you know, the 0560 is not new for 2014, just that finish. Initially, I think Blade Show 2011 is when this collaboration between Zero Tolerance and Rick Hinderer was first introduced, and since that time it's been a very popular blade for Zero Tolerance, and it makes perfect sense because it's longer and it's lighter and just a little more practical in terms of an EDC knife than especially a lot of the Zero Tolerance knives at the time. And even now, you know, it really hits a sweet spot as far as I'm concerned for size and weight and blade size and blade shape and materials and, you know, functionality, all that stuff. Really hits a really nice balance. Okay, and Zero Tolerance, you know, they're not about balance, right? They're about big, overbuilt, hefty knives with, you know, speed assist and all this. You know, this knife does not have speed assist. It's a lot lighter than other knives. It's a lot smaller. And so I think because of that, it's been very, very popular. Now, this is marketed as or billed as the production version of the XM18. And sure, that's fine to call it that. You can definitely see the similarities. However, anyone buying this should know, and you can tell by looking, but it's not like, for example, CRKT, where CRKT takes a designer knife. Let's use the best present example is the Fossil that was really popular this year. The Fossil that CRKT produced was exactly the same in terms of dimensions as Flavio Akelma's knife. The only difference was the materials primarily. And so this is not like that. This has a number of differences in terms of size, in weight, handle shape, even blade shape. It's not the Spanto grind. So there are some differences that exist, and that's probably worth noticing. Now, the other thing that's worth noticing is that there are some changes to this knife in the last generation or in the most current generation. I'll try to make note of those things. And finally, there's been a lot of discussion about this blade. You know, you can go on forums and read all kinds of things about edge retention and about lockup and about lock and all kinds of issues that people have had. And I will try to speak to those things as we work our way through the video. All right. So let's start off with size and weight, which we always do. This knife is 8 3/4 inches. The blade is 3 3/4 inches and the handle is 5 inches. The width dimension when it's closed is a little over 1.5 inches, and it's literally exactly 1/2 inch thick. So that's what it's going to be you're dealing with when it's in your pocket. Now, one of the things that's changed for 2014 or whatever they started making this current generation is that the titanium side, and if you've watched a few videos on this, you've seen others, the titanium side is not milled out anymore. Okay, I'll see if I can give you another angle on that. There we go. That increases the weight just slightly. So most websites list this knife as being just under 6 ounces, and now it's going to be just over 6 ounces. I'm not sure why that hasn't been updated anywhere. Maybe Kershaw just did it and kind of kept shipping them out. But yeah, that has changed. It is a little bit heavier than what's listed on virtually every website. Certainly everyone that I was able to find listed as 5.8 inches. 5.8 ounces. I couldn't find that I couldn't find the 6.2 ounce measurement anywhere. But you need to know that's more realistic. 6.2, 6.4 ounces. It's definitely over 6 ounces. Okay, so that's size and weight. I'm going to say for what you're getting, that's actually a pretty good size and weight. You know, I'm not going to complain about a couple of ounces. And I've carried this quite a lot and can tell you from experience that it's not a difficult knife to carry at all. Now, the blade is 3 3/4 inches of Elmax steel. Elmax is considered a super steel. It's a high flat grind with this nice swedge on top, and it's got a drop point. Should be pointed out that there have been some comments about Elmax. You know, Elmax doesn't hold a good edge, or Elmax isn't that great of a steel, or some have said, well, Elmax is fine, but just Kershaw messes it up when they, you know, grind it. And whatever the case may be, maybe that was true. Edge retention on this has been great. And because I was aware of all of that discussion, I purposely haven't sharpened this knife. All I did, and I haven't needed to, but what I did was I sharpened it when I first got it because it wasn't quite as sharp as I like a knife to be, got it to the edge that I like, and then all I've done is stropped it a few times since that time when I first sharpened it, okay? And that's been, you know, over a week, and what I've actually done with this knife is probably a month's worth of stuff. You know, I carved a 2x4 in half, I've cut cardboard, I've cut tree branches, all kinds of things, trying to see how the edge would hold up, and it's held up really, really well. So I personally cannot say that I'm having issues with edge retention. It's done a really good job of edge retention for me, and it's performed really well in every kind of task that I've done with it. You know, I've cut fruit and vegetables, I've cut meat, I've cut wood, rope, you name it, cardboard, paper, all kinds of things, and it's done really, really well. So I'm a big fan of this blade. The blade shape is very just broad spectrum, utilitarian blade shape, and I really appreciate that, especially in a knife that's primarily an EDC knife. Could this be a tactical blade, or could it be a combat knife? Sure, it could. Pretty much any blade can, but most of us, I think, are probably carrying this as our everyday carry knife, and we're going to care about how it performs in those tasks. And I'm going to tell you, it has performed for me very well. All right. Now, let's talk about deployment. This is another thing that people complained about. I mean, this is an odd complaint, but I guess a bunch of people said that the jimping would kind of tear up their fingers as they would flip this knife. Now, one, I don't know how you're flipping it so that your finger is hitting the jimping. I guess there, if I kind of do it like a weirdo, it does happen a little bit, but I do not have that problem at all. Now, I will say, if you see the shape of the flipper, I understand why it's that shape, because look, when the knife is open, it makes this perfect little circle for your finger, and I'll comment on this later, but ergonomics are outstanding on this knife when it's in hand. However, because of that little curved shape, you end up having to put your finger right on the point to deploy this knife. And that does get a little tender after a lot of times flipping this knife, and I've flipped this thousands of times. Okay, so if there is a complaint about deployment, it would maybe be that, although I've got to say it's as smooth as silk, and you can see that there, just, you know, perfect in terms of how smooth and nice it is, and that is because of the KVT technology, and it's a trapped ball bearing, so it's not, I don't know if you've ever, like the CRKT, whatever they call their ball bearing technology, they're not trapped. So you take that knife apart, you got ball bearings going everywhere. These are trapped. So it's more like, I don't know if you've ever taken apart a pair of roller blades, you know, you got the little ball bearings and you can replace them. That's more like what's going on in here. And it is very, very smooth. Now, one thing that I should comment on is the stop pins here. And this is not me. This is Kershaw. They have explained that really these were not intended to be thumb studs. I'm going to try. Yeah, I can get it to deploy via thumb stud, but it's difficult. In fact, it's very difficult. It can work, but boy, there's a lot of pressure. The detent on this is very strong. Now, as you know, I'm in Canada, so gravity knives are a big no-no, and so that strong detent is really important to me. You know, I need to have a knife where I'm fairly confident that it's not going to be able to be opened this way, because I could get in trouble. The detent is very good for that. The other thing is the detent is good for a flipper, because the only way flippers work is you build up pressure on that flipper, and the detent is stopping it from going. And then when you overcome the detent, it flips out. Now, let me demonstrate by, I'm going to move it past the detent. So there, it's out of the detent now. And trying to flip this open just doesn't happen. Hold on. I'll show you one more time. I'm wanting you to understand that there's a need for that strong detent when you have a flipper knife, because otherwise it won't flip out that way. it'll be a fail. And in fact, one of the complaints of the earlier models of this was that the detent wasn't strong enough. And so, you know, maybe, and I found a couple people mention that. And so maybe Kershaw has heard that criticism and remedied that. And that could also be true of the blade steel. Maybe it's true that Kershaw was burning the LMAX when they initially were making this knife, and they just changed their processes to address that issue that some people were having. So detent on this is very, very strong, and that's because it's meant to be a flipper. You can get it open via thumb studs, but it's not really meant to be opened that way, and it's not easy to open that way. Meanwhile, it flips like a pro because of that KVT system. All right, so that's deployment. Let's move down and talk about the handle. First thing, the handle is really, really cool. You've got this 3D machine G10 and titanium, and I think that's one of the things that sells this blade, just the cool high-end materials. You do have, of course, the lock bar stabilizer. And by the way, only the lock bar stabilizer and the blade stops here, those are the only things that are not in the black wash. Oh yeah, and the stainless steel liner there. And actually, I think that looks really cool. I think the steel or silver accents add something to the overall look of the knife. A couple people complained about that. And I kind of thought as I was hearing them, you know, do you really suppose Zero Tolerance is designing this knife and they haven't tried every color variation that they could think of to see how it looked? You know, I'm sure they have tons of black hardware hanging around. They could just easily put in, you know, black pieces in these locations, but they chose not to, and I think it was a good choice. I think the silver accents do add something to the look of the blade. Now, handle is very comfortable. Lanyard hole is here, and one of the cool things about this knife is you could also, if you weren't crazy about that particular location, you could easily put a lanyard around really either one of these two standoffs. The blade does not come close enough to either one that it would cut your, you know, whatever, 550 cord, I'm going to assume is what you'd put on there. All right. Now, another cool thing is that titanium is that the titanium lock face here has been carbonized. I'm going to see if I can show you, but I'll tell you, it's really, really hard to notice. I don't have a flashlight. Yeah, I don't think you're going to be able to see it. You can sort of see it from the front. When I look at it, in order to see it, I have to sort of tip it this way and look in. And I don't think there's just enough light to get you that particular angle. No, there isn't. So you're going to have to take my word for it. So what they've done on this lock face is done a process called carbonizing, where you take a little thing called a carbonizer that has a little electric arc, and it creates a titanium nitride coating on the lock face, and that coating is apparently, and I don't know this myself, I don't have machines to test Rockwell hardness, but what I've heard is that, and what I've read is that lock face is like 67, 68, 69 Rockwell hardness, which is much harder, of course, than even very hard steel. So what happens is you end up reducing the amount of wear that takes place on this lock face, because a titanium is actually softer than steel, so it would wear down more quickly, and you'd get, you know, the lock moving over more and more and more over time. Now that'll still happen a little bit, especially because there's more than just one part here, right? You've got a number of places where the blade interfaces with the handle. By the way, this is good. The more surface area you can have in contact, the stronger that lock is going to be. And there are a number of places where the blade locks in. There's the stop pin here, plus the lock face. And so you've got lots of contact area and therefore a very solid lockup. But it also means you're going to have less wear and tear. It's going to extend the life of that knife. And even, I suppose, worst case scenario, if you ended up with like 100% lockup, the knife would still be functional. So that's the lock, that's the handle. Oh, there is a lock bar stabilizer, and all that does is keep you from overextending that lock. Titanium being somewhat soft, I guess that could happen. One last thing I want to point out here, and that is a really cool little detail. On the pocket clip, they have actually continued the sort of acid etched or acid stone washed finish. It's darker, but, and I don't know if it's going to show up on camera or not. I'll see if I can get it. I'm going to have to say not. But with the naked eye, you can easily see that there's sort of a swirly pattern in the finish on the pocket clip, which, you know, ties everything together really nicely. It's sort of similar to, you can easily see the finish on here. Well, if you could, you know, the camera was higher quality, or you were sitting here in the room with me, that finish is sort of extended onto the clip, just darker. So that's pretty cool. It looks really, really good. Now, overall, I've got to say I'm really impressed with this knife. I'm impressed with the changes that have been made. Seems like Kershaw has heard the complaints that people have made, heard the issues that people were having, and taken steps to remedy that. That was already happening before. A while back, they changed the lock geometry on this because people were having issues with lockup. And so, you know, the fact that Kershaw is doing that, I'd say is a positive thing. You know, it would have been nice if they were perfect right off the presses, but the reality is whenever you come up with a new product, that usually isn't the case. So the fact that Kershaw has responded to some of the criticism that's been offered and done something positive about that, I'm quite pleased with that. The last thing I would say is to comment on price. You know, anything with ZT on it is going to be pricey. And if you're really into that particular blade or any of the ZT knives or any knife over $100, it's well worth your time and energy to, you know, save up your money, put it aside. Yep, there's the knife I want. You work towards saving up for it. Great. Then when it comes time to buy it, take that money, put it aside, and do your research. I have found these knives all the way from $310 all the way down to like $180. So that's a big range. And I don't know about you, but I'd much rather pay the $180 than the $300. You know, and it's just about where you choose to buy that thing. If you're in Canada, by the way, I went to Cabela's and this knife was like a horrendous price. I think it was like $325, which no one in their right mind should be paying for this knife. You know, do your research, go on eBay, go on Amazon, take the time and effort, go on some of the typical knife retailers. You know, a lot of times you can afford to pay the shipping, no problem, and still be way ahead if you find a good enough price. So all I'm going to say is any more expensive knife, take the time, do your research, and find the best price. Because let's be honest, you know, if you've had to work to save up your $250 for this knife and you can find it for $180, you can take that extra $60 and put it toward your next new knife. You know, or maybe you can put it toward a cool customized scale for this, or who knows what. The point is, I think we have a real responsibility as consumers to move the marketplace to better pricing by choosing those better priced options. There you go. That's my take on the Zero Tolerance 0560. I've got to say, I really, really like this knife. And if you're still watching, I need to give credit. I'll probably do so in the comments anyway. But I looked at this knife for a long time. The thing that finally put me over the edge was Dark Child's video, in which he talked about his favorite production knives. And this was the one that was the winner. This was his favorite production knife. And his points about it were what finally got me to pull the trigger and say, yeah, I definitely need to add that knife to my collection. So Dark Child, if you ever watch this, thanks a lot. I've got a great knife now in my collection. I'm really enjoying it. And largely that's because of your recommendation, in addition to, quite a bit of research and reading and messing around with other knives and stuff. So, part of the thing that put me over the edge and convinced me to buy this knife was Dark Child's video about it. There you go, YouTube. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you later.